Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Fight Chat Friday, episode 181. And today we are looking at the pre juniors once again from the recent World Championships in Tampere, Finland. This time we're looking at the female pre juniors 48 kilo category and a final between Denisa from Romania and Daniela from Spain. So we want to see if there's a little bit of a difference or something to be seen between the junior or the pre junior male fights that we've watched in the last couple of weeks and the pre junior female side of the division. So without any further ado, let's just jump straight into this one.
Yeah, so this one straight off the bat for me, these girls have a much better idea of ring position and squeezing in particular. So a good start from Daniela here in blue, who is using that front leg carry like we were talking about to have more of a threat behind it. Quite a tall girl as well, so she's able to use that range and use that kick quite aggressively. And already, only 30 seconds in, 20 seconds in, we see two squeezes towards the edge and a warning for each side already racking up. So a little bit more similar to what we'd expect from the junior ranks as of stands so far, Adrian.
Yeah, and I think when we get to the stats later, we will see, okay, yeah, there are some, let's say, pre-junior style decisions being made every now and again that are maybe less optimal. But what we are seeing is that there is, and particularly from Spain, much more deliberate carrying into contact. So the distance and the intent to do something with the initial lift is definitely there. From both girls, but most especially, I think, from Spain, as we see the carrying into contact with the will to follow on or to try and get a reaction, a predictable reaction that she can then do something with and pick a follow-on shot.
Yeah, so already we see good squeezing coming from that front leg and using the ring position to gain an advantage rather than just a you go, I go mentality. So Spain particularly is doing a good job for that from my point of view. But then we also see return like we see right here from Romania. Now, bad ring positioning here, but I'm
Yeah,
sure that's something they can improve on as they get more experienced. Just kind of being able to track the angles correctly and always having your back towards the center of the ring instead of going in straight lines out. So, so far, some things that we can work on: a little bit of stepping on side kicks from Spain in particular. So that's something that you might expect to be eliminated by the time you see them at junior, and a little bit of leaning as a defensive ply as well, rather than movement. So that's something that you want to avoid, especially in ITF, because there's definitely headshots going to be coming your way if you're leaning too much. You get away with it in boxing and other sports, but ITF Taekwondo, not a good one to be leaning too much as a defensive tactic.
yeah, I do think as well what we're seeing is a slightly difference between the two girls in terms of their willingness to pick particular follow-on shots. So we can see where Spain is happy to pull the trigger on the back leg, which takes a certain confidence, to bring in that back leg turning kick as a following shot that Romania won't be able to step through her. And then we've seen the first blitz as well from Romania, which again, a true blitz again from outside kicking distance has been rare enough to see across the pre-junior division. We haven't seen
Yeah.
too much of it. So willingness to go directly to hands. And here again, unfortunately, I think this particular exchange, the biggest point scoring exchange in the match, where Romania got caught coming forward with the side kick and the back kick, and the scores have now slipped all the way to blue.
Yeah, nice to see Beckett coming in. It's not something you particularly see from this level of international competition at the pre-junior, especially in the female division. So it's nice to see some variation of techniques. I feel at the start of round two, we've seen a change of ply from Romania in particular, where the front leg carry was a little bit more aggressive from her. And I think the idea there and the strategy was to use that to set up the blitz, which inevitably
Mm.
turned the tide against her because she ended up running into a defensive side kick like we see here and
Yeah.
also a back kick earlier in the fight. So maybe just a little bit of we call it patient aggression. So just building that aggression up a little bit more patiently, not just running in gung ho and not having your defensive wits about you. Just selecting that moment a little bit better and using your footwork to get in and out. If you're just kind of launching from direct, like you alluded to earlier, it's not something that we see. Then there's a good chance if you're against somebody who's crafty, you're going to run into that kick, especially defensive if they have that range like we see that Spain has here. The extension of that distance makes it more difficult. But then on the
Yeah.
other side of that, you want to get through it as well to be able to use your footwork to get in and out of that range to set up some rhythm changes.
Yeah, Spain be that little bit taller. There's been a couple of occasions there where Denisa went for the blitz, and Spain just had that space in the stance, and the length of the stance buys you time. Space or distance equals time when you're sparring. So she was able to soak back onto the back leg, pull the front foot back, and make space for the defensive side kick. And on those couple of occasions, you can totally understand why Romania wanted to go for the blitz. It was probably the most effective exchange that she had in round one. But her couple of attempts to pull it off in round two have actually given the defensive side kick to Spain, and those have been the primary things separating the scores.
Yeah. Can we go back, Adrian, to the start of round two? Just have a quick
Yeah.
look. So I think one of the big
Where are we
factors that
at?
we'd be looking for here really would be to get Romania as they come out into round two to use that leg to disrupt the Spanish opponent. So they do it really well here. The girl from Romania is able to use that leg to get on top and to be disruptive, not to leave the girl have a more progressive and positive impact with it. So that's what I would like to see her continue it and not rushing to hands. Obviously,
Mm.
that's easier to say now as she runs into a back kick and a defensive side kick, but that strategy was working quite well. So it's important for you to find out what are the strategies, not only that are working good for you, but also cancel out your opponent's biggest strengths. And we've seen in the first round, the Spanish competitor was really, really good at being able to use her own front leg to squeeze space and to be aggressive with it. So by cancelling that out, that was allowing Romania to kind of come back into the match a little bit. So that's a big takeaway for me from that point of view.
Yeah, and the couple of occasions where she's pulled the trigger a little bit reflexively, or maybe less thoughtfully, or in less of a planned way to go to the blitz, has been the cost. So it's kind of pushing too hard to get the obvious shot that you want. So once your opponent has arrived at a position where they kind of know to expect a particular shot, it's much more difficult to make that shot work. And I think that's what's happened with Romania, where she's she's done a great job, as you said, at the beginning of round two, pushing Spain back into the corner, looks to pull the blitz. Spain does a great job of effectively doing the X-ray evasion and getting out of the corner, reversing the position. And Romania chases again
Yeah.
and gets caught. But then the default is, I've got to get this blitz, and she's not necessarily getting the situation or the positioning right for it, and just feels that she has to push. And I think that does get her into a little bit of trouble as round two progresses.
And look, it's much easier for the Spanish girl as well because she has a height advantage and she's
Yeah,
4-0 up. So when you have both of those things on your side, the person has to come to you. So you can just kind of sit back behind the distance that you have and be able to use that front leg like she did, and then eventually the back kick as well once she got past that first line of defense.
yeah. It's clear as we look at the stats, we can see how much that Romania had to use that front leg carry just to kind of maintain some control of the distance. And again, that is something that you might expect against a taller opponent. So it's no major surprise that it's not connecting as often as maybe she might like. But it is still very, very important to her trying to maintain control of her space within the ring. Higher number of shots thrown in this one than we saw in some of the boys, which is kind of nice and interesting to see.
Yeah.
But more variety coming out of Romania than Spain, but not necessarily with huge effect.
Yeah, I like to see as well that the side kick level is much higher, Adrian, because
Yeah.
although we do track these stats ourselves, Adrian actually tracked this fight, and there's obviously a little bit of deviation from like our own perspective. It's not like
Yeah.
official or anything like that. It's just pen and paper job from both of ourselves. But like obviously, this particular fight has a little bit more side kicks with the numbers of overall shots thrown compared to the front leg carry. Whereas the last couple of pre-junior fights with the boys that we looked at, there was a lot of front leg carries, but then there was no actual side kicks going towards the hip and
Yeah.
aggression nailing that. So that's something that obviously played into the benefits of the ring position and the squeezing to get people out of the ring a little bit more. And of course, that also sets up the opportunities to get the hands a little bit more because one plays into the other.
Yeah, I think overall what's reflected in that is the match being fought at a slightly closer distance, and we'll be more inclined to mark it down as a side kick when it goes directly from the front leg into contact without
Mm-hmm.
need to add a second hop or double up the kick. When it just goes from the floor onto the hip or onto the glove, we'll give it the benefit of the doubt and call it a side kick no matter how it's formed.
Yeah, and I think that that is a big, big factor in this particular fight, which made it a closer looking fight towards the junior ranks, in my
Mm.
opinion, anyway. But here we see a very interesting stat from Spain with a 64% contact rate. It's not something we see too often. So being very, very efficient in the amount of shots that she's able to get into contact, which is very, very interesting. We don't often see that.
And the contact rate is pretty good as well. So that's even though there's a lower number of overall shots, less than 50 shots thrown across the match, it didn't look or feel like that as we watched the match, just because there's enough over and back with it. But that's one contact every 8 seconds, which is quite good at whatever level you want to look at.
Yeah.
Whereas we can see that the primary difference in terms of the shots thrown is Romania having quite a few more front leg carries, but having to use them just to control space and not actually making contact with them. Also, again, whenever we see a number like 7 warnings, we know it's a little bit less than optimal. And even with maybe less than optimal squeezing and pressure from Spain, it was better in this than we'd seen from a couple of the boys' fights over the last couple of weeks. And that the result of that is 7 warnings, mostly for traveling. And again, 2 full deductions, which is makes quite a difference over the course of the full match.
Yeah, and that will play into the next slide that we have, and where we can see how much of an impact that makes. So there's a safety margin of 4. Even though there was 2 points, you still had that safety margin. So the warnings wouldn't have actually made an overall difference, but
No.
very, very nice to have as an extra luxury, because if we go down to the bottom right, flags in play, only 1 flag in play at the end of this fight. Whereas if the warnings weren't a factor, that could have been 2 or potentially 3 flags in play, which makes the fight in the dying seconds a completely different kettle of fish altogether.
That's it. Daniela wouldn't have been able to go to, as we say, get on her bike and start circling. She might have had to stay much more focused on staying in the match if the safety margin wasn't there. So it just raises the tension and increases the opportunity for mistakes at the end. 12 total exchanges, and just again for anyone who's following along, this is where both competitors are involved. So if it's an exchange, generally speaking, we're looking for both competitors to be involved in that. And what we saw was, generally speaking, and in particular on the last in contact side of things, the last word on all of those exchanges went to Spain. Or the
Yeah.
majority of those exchanges went to Spain. And although there was 3 decision flips, they were primarily in the first round. So the last minute, minute and a half, the tail of the tape had been told, and it had moved in Spain's favor.
And that's something, that Adrian, that we've seen in the pre-juniors so far. This is our 4th pre-junior fight we've covered. That
Mm,
it's not something that the pre-juniors are particularly more experienced at, because they're able to get that first initiation shot really well, and then there's nothing that comes after that. So this is one
yeah,
of the first fights we've seen where there was somebody really effective at getting the first shot into contact, matching the exchange in the middle, and then getting that last exclamation point at the end of the exchange then as well. So that's obviously a big factor as to why she won. Not sure if she went on to win the final as well, but very, very effective pre-junior
yeah,
fighter.
that was the final. That was the final.
Okay, I said semi
Yeah,
on the little overlay. So yeah, there we go.
yeah. So yeah, quite an interesting one. And I think when we look at the what in terms of they try to control there were certainly areas when Denisa did quite a good job in terms of managing where she was in the ring and taking control of the space. But I think overall the fact that a lot of her carries were just to take space back, and I think the squeezing side of things was better done by Daniela from Spain, as well as the overall control in terms of the scoring shots. I think we just have to give all 3 to Spain on this occasion.
And the tempo intensity, Adrian, like at the start of this fight, we seen Daniela from Spain was very aggressive and going for it a little
Yeah.
bit more. But then when she was in control, she was able to reduce to that intensity and that tempo to where she wanted it. So it's
Yes.
not, it doesn't mean that like the control means that you're
Always
being the
higher.
aggressive one all the time. It means that you're playing it into the favor of what you want. And obviously
Mm,
she was ahead on the scorecards, and she was able to bring down the control and maybe make it a less high volume match towards the end of the fight, which
definitely.
played into her hands. Better control
Yeah.
for her.
You can definitely see a huge difference between first 30 seconds and last 30 seconds, where
Yeah.
she's trying to ramp up the intensity and create pressure, shorten the distance in the match, and play the whole match on the back edge of the ring until she has that 4 flag lead. And it's the last 30 seconds. And then she's looking at creating space, reversing the position. She's not sparring from the center out. She's changed, and she's willing to let Romania chase her and use the open ring and slow the pace down. So, yeah, it's exactly what you'd want to see.
Yeah, so I was quite impressed with this one. More of the most poised pre-juniors that we've seen so far, in my opinion, able to
Mm.
use the things that we want to see, the areas of control and how you dictate the fight, control the fight. Able to do that pretty well for a pre-junior. So congratulations on World Championship win.
Well done. Well done. Folks, that's us for this week. We will see you in the next one. Bye now.
See you then.